I want to stress that this Gothic aesthetic that Abbot Suger began at the Abbey Church of Saint Denis will develop. There's a kind of quest and a competition, a pushing for more height, definitely, higher and higher ceilings, for more of a sense of the dematerializing of the walls, so that solid stone seems to become lace. Delicate patterns are what you see when you look at the structure. You don't actually see the weight and the heft of the stone. You see ornamentation. More and more ornamentation is where these cathedrals are going, with more and more stained glass. So we're looking at Chartres, and then we'll see Reims, which will have even more stained glass if you compare it to Chartres. And then ultimately the Sainte-Chapelle, where the walls themselves seem to disappear. So keep that in mind, because we are still looking at Chartres, but we're actually going to be able to see that process of more, that development from an early to a more full expression of Gothic. We're going to see that as we study Chartres. And here I'm reminding you of something that I want to keep coming back to. A Gothic cathedral is a multimedia experience. Multimedia, media meaning materials. It's not just architecture, it's also painting, because stained glass was a form of painting, the most prestigious, expensive, and magnificent form of painting you could have. And then it was also sculpture, as we're going to look at now. So if we come back to these photographs of Chartres, I want to focus now on the exterior of the building. And remember that these cathedrals are still pilgrimage sites. Remember, Chartres has the tunic, the cloth worn by Mary, so the saying goes, when she gave birth to Jesus. So it has a major relic. And so it is worth thinking about these buildings from the outside, not just from the glorious naves. And that is something that a pilgrim is very aware of, but also remember that the word cathedral literally means bishop's seat. It is the, you could say, capital or home base of the bishop. And we're going to see that the bishop arrives at these doorways for certain ceremonies. So if we look closely at this photograph of the west facade, the word facade is a French word that means the face of the building. The west face of the building is important because this is the entrance that goes into the nave, and because this is at its core a basilica with a longitudinal axis, this west entrance points directly to the eastern apse. And what's interesting looking at this photograph is that you can actually see a curious little puzzle. Why are the two towers asymmetrical? That's because of this developmental process I'm talking about. The towers encapsulate how the Gothic moves, gets pushed towards more ornamentation, more height, more delicate intricacy. This tower, the South Tower, is built in 1194, and you can see that the buttresses supporting the stone are pretty chunky and solid feeling. And you can see that the windows are rather narrow and fairly low, and then you have the tower cone. But over here, the North Tower, it's built, look how much later, 1507. More than 300 years go by. Gothic is still the dominant prestigious style, although we're going to see that that starts to change in Italy. But what's happening is this tower has grown taller, thinner. Look at how lacy it is, how much like a wedding cake. It's a stone wedding cake with all these gewgaws and frou-frous and prettied up, all this delicate ornamentation. So there's a push that's happening as Gothic evolves for more extremes of glamorous height and more slender proportions, all in the service of elegance. Elegance and glamour, because this is the royal style. So what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to continue this work on the exterior, but focusing on the portals, starting here at the west portal and then moving around the building, because we're going to focus on sculpture. And we can actually see the sculpture of the portals changing, the style developing from decade to decade. And it's going to be really important to look closely and watch the style change from this west portal, which is the first one carved and created, to then this portal, and to see what's changing in terms of the portal itself as a structure ornamented with sculptures, but also the style of the sculpted bodies, the figures, what's happening to figurative sculpture, the representation of bodies.